Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife under this agenda item. The GAP supports the California Fish and Wildlife proposal of extending the sport fishing season through November 15th or until the allocation is taken, whichever is earlier. This will spread out the season and allow California anglers more time to catch their halibut sport allocation. Additionally, the GAP supports ODF&W's proposal for the use of long leader gear in an all-depth halibut trips in Oregon, as reported in our September 2020 GAP report on the halibut catch sharing plan. Furthermore, the GAP supports the proposed seasonal dates as proposed by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife report. The GAP notes that the tribal fishery was successful again this year with another near record harvest of halibut. And despite the challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic, the commercial sector landed high quality fish throughout the season. GAP members also recommend a Area 2A total constant exploitation yield mortality limit of 1.65 million pounds to the International Pacific Halibut Commission, consistent with the 2020 TCEY, as noted in Table 6 of the February 2020 IPHC report. And thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Questions for the GAP? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Dale. Next, we'll go to the EC and Greg Bush. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. My name's Greg Bush, the chair of the Enforcement Consultants, and I'll be reading the Enforcement Consultants report on the 2021 Catch Sharing Plan and Annual Regulations Final Action. The Enforcement Consultants have reviewed the material associated with Agenda Item E1, 2021 Catch Sharing Plan and Annual Regulations, and provide the following comments. Supplemental CDF Report 1. The EC has no concerns with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's request to move the end date of the California sport fishery within the halibut catch sharing plan to no later than November 15th. Supplemental WDFW Report 1. Removal of the South Coast Recreational Yellow Eye Rockfish Conservation Area and the Westport Offshore YRCA. The EC supports the removal of both of Washington's YRCAs and the halibut catch sharing plan. Columbia River Subarea, allowing retention of certain rockfish species on all depth halibut days. The EC supports Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's request to allow retention of certain rockfish species on all depth halibut days. The species listed in WDFW's report are consistent with the species proposed for retention under ODFW's long leader gear fishing proposal. The EC appreciates this proposed consistency between the states. The remaining rockfish inconsistencies would be limited to the gear used to retain those fish and the bag limit, which the EC believes to be manageable. Supplemental ODFW Report 1, allowing all depth halibut and long leader gear fishing on the same trip. The EC supports Alternative 1 to allow all depth halibut and long leader gear fishing for rockfish on the same trip. The EC recognizes that Oregon is currently the only state that has authorized the use of long leader gear for rockfish, so this would primarily affect Oregon enforcement. The EC acknowledges this will create some complexity to the regulations, but has worked with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to address those concerns. As previously mentioned, the list of rockfish species allowed to be retained with long leader gear would be consistent with what is proposed by WDFW. This concludes the EC report.
Thank you, Greg. Questions for Greg? Okay, seeing none, thank you. All right. I see that we don't have any public comment, so that would move us into council action. Any public or council discussion? And if no council discussion, do we have Any motions by chance? Aha, Heather.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I would like to have a motion for this agenda item. I think Sandra has it.
Okay. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. I move that the council adopt the proposed season structure, season dates, and groundfish changes to the catch sharing plan 2021 as described in agenda item E1, supplemental WDFW report 1.
Excuse me, my mute was on. Does the language of the screen accurately reflect your motion?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Speak to your motion.
Need a second.
I'm sorry. I see Phil's hands up, so my bad.
I would second the motion.
Thank you, Phil. It's by the time this meeting's over with, I'll have this down. Okay. Heather, speak to your motion.
All right, thank you. I think we had really good input from our stakeholders this year. The changes are relatively minor compared to what we had in place in 2020, but I think they offer a really exciting fishing opportunity for halibut in 2021. And I appreciate the coordination with ODFW on the season dates, getting those in place, and also throughout the 2021-2022 groundfish harvest specification process, where we talked a lot about the alignment of these rockfish retention that we're going to be able to allow in the upcoming season. I think that's also another really exciting opportunity for Washington and Oregon recreational halibut fishermen.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion? Butch Smith. Butch?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, thank you. I'm going to support this, of course, but I would like to thank all the hard work that WDF&W has done on this, and Heather and her staff and the coordination that we still, I think, got to work on a little bit more with our friendly state next to us in Oregon on the Columbia River, but assurance that we will continue to evolve that process, and hopefully we can get things where they're almost perfect, if not perfect, in the next go around. So I will be supporting both motions when they come, but I'm supporting this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Butch. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call for the question after a short pause for people to unmute. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. That takes care of Washington. I see Maggie Sumner has her hand up. Maggie?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd like to offer a motion for Oregon.
Please.
Sandra has it.
Okay.
I move the council adopt a change to the 2021 Pacific Halibut Catch Sharing Plan to allow long leader fishing on the same trip as all depth halibut fishing in Oregon, as recommended in agenda item E1A, supplemental ODFW report 1, November 2020.
Thank you. Does the language on the screen accurately reflect your motion?
Yes, it does.
Okay, seconds. And I see Krista Swinson. Okay, Maggie, speak to your motion, please.
Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. As I noted in our report under this agenda item, we think this could provide some additional opportunity without risking any significant increase in yellow eye impacts. This has been requested by anglers in Oregon for several years, including a public comment letter in the November briefing book from Mr. Steve Godin of the Oregon Coast Anglers. And note that.
Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll go to the coast to Marcy Uremko. Marcy.
Yes, you, Mr. Vice Chair. I do have a motion, and I believe.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
All right. I move that the council adopt the proposed season end date for the California recreational fish for inclusion in the 21 catch sharing plan as described in item E1 supplement DFW report 1.
Thank you, Marcy. Does the image accurately reflect motion?
Yes, it does.
Very good. And for second, Bob Dooley. Thank you, Bob. What's your motion?
Great, thank you. I think our CDFW report thoroughly describes the rationale and just the support from the EC and the GAP.
All right. Thank you. Questions for Marcy or discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think that Brett, I think we're done with this. I believe we're done with that one. So we go to the second action is adopt final changes to the 2021 annual fishery regulations. So.
Chair, this is Brett.
Yes.
I think the actions you just took adopt the final changes for the CSP on number 1, as you note, and those will be in turn placed in regulation as well. So I think that council's actions are complete at this point. You've adopted the changes that were proposed by the 3 states and also noted in the situation summaries to have the details of the changes to the CSP as necessary.
Okay, very good. Very good. So, okay, that concludes, so that concludes E1. So you're going to take us to E2?
Certainly, I'm in the seat for that. We can roll right into E2. The council is ready for that?
I think we are.
Okay. Looking at, pardon me? Okay.
Proceed.
Thank you. I'm looking at agenda item E2, situation summary for the transition of Area 2A fishery management and final action. We have several reports in the briefing book on this item. You've been working through this since the past few years, and in 2019, the council agreed to move forward with the transition of the management and authority for this fishery and moving that out of the hands of the IPHC and into the council. Just looking over the situation summary, we have some back in March 2020, we adopted some preliminary preferred alternatives there. There's 4 of them noted, and I do have a PowerPoint that I will be rolling through to go through those. I just want to note that what the council action is here for today, and that's to adopt the final preferred alternatives for transitioning it to a management from the International Pacific Halibut Commission to the National Fisheries Service and the Pacific Fishery Management Council. So within the briefing book, you have attachment 1, which is the updated range of alternatives for that proposed transfer, which you've all seen before. One minor change was added to alternative 4, and I'll go over that. You have supplemental attachment 2. That's my PowerPoint presentation that I will load here real soon, and you can follow along. In the briefing book, then we have supplemental SAS report, a GAP report, and an EC report as well. I don't believe there is any public comment under this agenda item. I just want to double check. I haven't seen anything posted, so no public comment right now, and I don't see anybody signed up either. So that's my overview. Before I go into the PowerPoint presentation, I want to just entertain any questions from the council before I move on.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Questions for Brett before we head to the presentation? Okay, seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, let me just pull this up here. Okay, so we're here to look at the updated range of alternatives for the proposed transfer of management responsibilities for Area 2A. We have highlighted in bold throughout this presentation the preliminary preferred alternatives. And so I just want to recognize the great work of Robin Elke, who's been presenting and working with National Fisheries Service. I've been sort of on the side helping her here and there, but she's done a wonderful job shepherding this through. I do want to thank Frank Lockhart and also recognize other staff that have been doing this, Catherine Blair and also Josh Lindsay, who came in as well, and those who have been helping on the side and as well in National Fisheries Service. So this is a lot of great work done by this to narrow this down to the specifics, and so I just wanted to recognize their work. As I said, the goals for today is to review the preliminary preferred alternatives, adopt some final preferred alternatives, and then discuss the future workload and schedule. Some highlights here. It's, we started this in 2019 and provided some reports on management, and we decided to focus on the management, the transfer of management rather than tinkering with the fishery itself. We largely wanted to keep it as status quo as best as possible as we transferred the management out of the hands of IPHC. We did adopt a range of alternatives in March, and then in September, we adopted some preliminary preferred alternatives. And then now here we are in November, looking to finalize these alternatives. We really, like I said, focused on the transfer of management of the responsibilities for the two entities involved. That would be the fishery management process side of things, where it falls, working on the framework and developing the vessel limits and the season dates, working with the council on that. And then we split this off also into permitting process, looking really how to implement the permitting process. And that was mostly an administrative task that would fall mainly on NIF. So that's kind of what we focused on in this document. As we know, we wanted to accommodate the transfer of management, and the council need to really establish a framework for pre-season process. It's kind of what we do here now, the September and November timeframe, provide some guidance for in-season management, and then decide when those decisions will be made. So that's part of the alternative here, is when are we going to make these decisions, pre-season and in-season kind of stuff. So, and then we want to make sure we provide for a public comment and review when we do this and take this management process over. Looking at the three alternatives that we've provided for the schedule and process for season setting, we really have a no action alternative, which technically isn't really a viable option. IPHC asked us to move this into the hands of the council and take this task on. And so we came up with one alternative, which is really to focus on working with the directed fishery and consider that to make that decision. The next alternative here at the bottom, 4.1.3, is really kind of the same situation as considering 4.1.2. However, we would really maybe delay that guidance, thinking about the vessel limits and the in-season changes until spring. The main reason there is we don't get the TAC out of IPHC until after the first of the year. So we have to largely assume the TAC will be similar, the effort might be similar as the past, and so we have to make some assumptions about that, what those vessel limits will be and what those season dates might need to be. But you really focused on just thinking about the CSP process here in September, November, rather than waiting till the spring. And here's a little more detail on that. September, we adopt a fishery framework, including any guidance for vessel limits and in-season change for public review. And then in November, adopt the fishery framework for recommendations to NIMS, basically what we're doing here and now. And then NIMS implements the fishery. And the biggest key to that is NIMS doesn't have to change their typical rulemaking schedule to implement those regulations to get people fishing on the water in June and throughout that summer. Focusing on the permitting process, we look at 4.2.1, which is a preferred alternative, which we're trying to decide which Area 2A fisheries would be issued permits. And then we also think about what are the application deadlines. So those were two things that we needed to focus on, and I'll talk about that. We also talked about development of the application process and how that would be done, the notification for issuance of permits, and then 4.2.5, the proof of permit. So I'm going to run through those really quickly here. Under Alternative 1, we would issue permits only for the Area 2A non-Indian directed commercial halibut fishery. But then under 2, the council preliminary decided to just issue permits for all Area 2A halibut fisheries. And that includes the commercial directed incidental salmon, troll, incidental sablefish fishery, where the sablefish fishery is fishing and retaining halibut, and then the recreational charter halibut fisheries. It made sense to take that permitting process and put it all under the guise of NIMS rather than just one permit and leaving that permitting process on the side. So right now, your preliminary preferred is Alternative 2. Regarding the application deadlines, we looked at the status quo, which is to maintain the IPHC application deadline of April 30th. We decided, though, that Alternative 2 may be a better route to give NIMS the flexibility and determine what's appropriate for an application deadline. Under the development of an application process and the notification for issuance of permits, NIMS seems best suited to determine and implement the most efficient and appropriate application platform. We talked a little bit about how they would receive applications, whether in mail or via an online application. But in the end, it was decided that it was best to just allow NIMS to implement what they think is best and most diverse for their fishery constituents. And it seems that NIMS is best also suited to determine that the appropriate means of notification. So when you apply, you got notification that you're actually going to get a permit. So and we left it up to NIMS to decide how to notify participants that they're got a permit for the next fishery. Regarding proof of permit, here's where we made one minor change since the decisions made in September. Under Alternative 1, it was the status quo, which would require a proof of permit to be on board fishing vessel and make it readily available upon request, regardless of the type of permit, for example, a paper or electronic. So there was a little bit of concern of just requiring just a paper copy, but this day and age with technical advances, we feel like some people could just go ahead and show it on their phone or their computer to prove up to any enforcement agents that board the vessel or on the dock to show that they have a permit for the fishery. And NIMS would just to provide access to that permit, either in a printable format or send a paper copy directly to the participant. So under Alternative 2, there was an idea of no requirement for paper proof of permit or to be on board the fishing vessel. And was important that people show that they have a permit. Regarding then, those are the preferred alternatives at this point, preliminary preferred. Regarding the roles and responsibilities, we really want to look at what management entity would be responsible for the tasks related to the management of the fishery in the future. And in page 9 and then table 2 and 3, we have a laundry list of people who are involved in managing this fishery. We've adjusted that to make it seem sensible. It could be adjusted in the future, but we want to get a sense of who will be responsible for what. And some tasks will fall on the NIMS purview and others will fall naturally to the council. So thinking about the workload and the timeline, where we've come, obviously since November 2019, here we are in November 2020, we're trying to finalize our preferred alternatives. And then we would look to in February to March 2021, where NIMS, if they have the staff and the ability to go ahead and continue to develop that permitting system and get it online, we would hope that it would be done by January 2022, where they would initiate the new permit system. In this timeline, which is the hope at this point, as we transition the management under the council and under NIMS, really we'd be looking, if this was a true workable timeline, we'd be looking to set those season dates and those vessel limits next September, November timeline. So we're looking at September 21 and November, and then work those in and provide those recommendations to NIMS, and then hopefully the permitting system would come online in January 2022 to execute a fishery then in that following June or whenever those season dates were set. I'll go ahead and put those council adopted preliminary preferred alternatives up there again for you to take a quick look. But Vice Chair, that does conclude my presentation and overview of that attachment 1, please.
Thank you, Brett. Questions for Brett from the council on this presentation? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. We'll go to the GAP report, and I believe Susan Chambers is going to give that. Susan?
Yes, good afternoon. Can I do a mic check to make sure you guys can hear me okay?
You're good to go.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, my name is Susan Chambers, and I will be reading the Groundfish Advisory Subpanel Report on Pacific Halibut transition of the Area 2A fishery management into the record. The Groundfish Advisory Panel received an overview of the 2021 Pacific Halibut Catch Sharing Plan from Mr. Brett Wiedoff, Pacific Fishery Management Council staff, and offers the following comments and suggestions. The GAP reviewed the updated range of alternatives for the proposed transfer of management under this agenda item and suggests the council adopt the bolded alternatives as the final preferred alternatives. The GAP supported all these alternatives in our September 2020 report as well. Specific to item 4.2.5, permitting process proof of permit, the GAP continues to support alternative 1, status quo, as revised, with the proposed revisions in the updated report. That is, requiring either a paper copy or electronic copy as proof of permit. As we noted in our September report, the GAP understands the permit owner or vessel captain will be responsible for producing the proof of permit, whether paper or electronic, even if the vessel is out of sailor service range or other electronic access is unavailable. The GAP also notes that retaining a permit application process as similar as possible to the current International Pacific Halibut Commission application process is preferred. That is, apply online and receive an email copy of the permit, etc. A potentially more complicated federal process could create confusion for participants who are used to the existing permit application procedure. And that concludes our statement. If you have any questions, I will be happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Questions for Susan on the GAP report? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next we'll go to the SAS and Megan Mueller-Waters. Megan.
Thank you very much. This is Megan Mueller-Waters, SAS Vice Chair with Agenda Item E2A, Supplemental SAS Report 1. Salmon Advisory Subpanel Report on Transition of Area 2A Fishery Management Final Action. The SAS received an overview from Mr. Brett Wiedoff, Pacific Fishery Management Council staff regarding the management of the Area 2A non-Indian commercial directed Pacific halibut fishery. The SAS reviewed the updated range of alternatives for the proposed transfer of management under this agenda item and suggests the council adopt the bolded alternatives in that document as the final preferred alternatives. They are repeated here in our report. I am happy to read those aloud to you or to skip that in the interest of time at the council's discretion.
Well, now you gave me a decision points here. I think just when you had the one pager would be fine.
Okay. Item number 1, number 4.1.2, alternative 2, consider the directed fishery framework during the CSP process in September and November, including any guidance for vessel limits and in-season changes for NIMS implementation. Number 2, 4.2.1, alternative 2, issue permits for all Area 2A halibut fisheries, commercial, directed, incidental salmon troll, incidental sablefish, and recreational charter halibut fisheries. 3, 4.2.2, alternative 2, allow NIMS to determine the appropriate application deadlines for all commercial halibut applications set to coincide with council meetings and NIMS processing time. 4, 4.2.5, alternative 1, status quo revised, require proof of permit to be onboard fishing vessel and made readily available upon request, regardless of the type of permit, e.g. paper or electronic. NIMS to provide access to permit in a printable format or send paper copy directly to participant. That concludes our report. I'll answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. Questions for Megan on the SAS report? Butch Smith. Butch?
Not a question, Mr. Vice Chair. Just congratulations to Megan for being elected the Vice Chair of the SAS. First Vice Chair that's come from the conservation seat, and I believe the first female to take that honor on the SAS. And I think it's a real accomplishment and speaks volumes about Miss Mueller and or Mrs. Waters, I guess now, I'm sorry, and the work she has done in such a short time with the SAS. I just wanted to recognize that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Butch. Yep.
Thank you, Butch. We're trying to turn this ship around.
No comment.
Any more questions or comments for Megan? Okay, Megan, thank you. And congratulations on your recent marriage also. So
thank you very much.
Okay. And with that, we will go to the EC report with Greg Bush. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Name is Greg Bush. I'm the chair of the enforcement consultants, and I'll be reading the enforcement consultants report on transition of Area 2A fishery management, final action. The enforcement consultants have reviewed the material associated with agenda item E2, transition of Area 2A fishery management, final actions. The following are our comments. Timing, agenda item E2, attachment 1, section 4.1, and that should be point 2. The EC supports the recommended change to 4.1.2, alternative 2, and believes considering the directed fishery framework during the halibut catch shearing plan process in September and November will address the notification and timing concerns we expressed in our September 2020 EC supplemental report to agenda item I2. This timing ensures industry and enforcement have time to review and incorporate any changes into our respective planning processes. Proof of permit, agenda item E2, attachment 1, section 4.2.5. The EC supports the recommended changes to 4.2.5, alternative 1. The EC believes requiring participants to have proof of permit versus paper proof of permit be readily accessible will provide flexibility and ease the burden on industry, yet enable compliance. The EC has provided several other reports related to the transition of halibut management from International Pacific Halibut Commission to the Council, including under November 2019 agenda items F2 and F3, September 2020 agenda items I1 and I3, and November 2020 agenda items E1 and E3. That concludes my report. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Questions for Greg? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Greg. With that, I can see there's no public comment, which brings us to council discussion and action.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Frank.
We'll consider it raised, Frank, so proceed.
Okay. I just wanted to start off with a couple of comments echoing what Brett said. First of all, Robin has done an amazing job over these many months, approaching 2 years, I believe. And I really appreciated the work she did kind of behind the scenes to take all of the different discussions and kind of bring them together. And I also, just in general, wanted to thank Brett for taking on at the end. We've had some good conversations at the end. I think we're at a good place. And then you already mentioned some other staff, but Catherine Blair from National Marine Fishery Service deserves a lot of credit as well. So, and then overall, I wanted to thank the council for their work on this. It has been, I think, very close to 2 years that we've been working on this in earnest. There were a lot of good discussions, and I think we've come out at a good place now. And I think the council is ready to take final action on this agenda item now. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Anyone else? Comments? I would agree with you that I think the harmony of the statements and the seamlessness that this seems to be going is pretty incredible, and just represents just a lot of good work that has been done. So, Heather Hall. Heather?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, I have some comments, and I'm also prepared to offer a motion if no one else has anything they want to bring up in the discussion. But I really appreciate what Frank just said. We talked about it a little bit at our morning meeting, that this has been a long time coming, and we've had some really good discussions, and it's really neat to see it at this place where we're at, looking to take final action. When I look at the advisory body reports and the input we've received, it seems like there's a widespread support for where we are. So yes, thanks to all of the hard work that's gone into this over the last couple of years, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. Any other comments before Heather makes her motion? I didn't hear you right, Heather. You're going to make a motion here?
Yes, you did. I'm prepared, and I think Sandra has that.
Okay. Well, I think that we'll go with that. How's that sound? Proceed, please.
Okay.
There we go.
That's it. Thank you, Sandra. I move that the council adopt the following as final preferred alternatives for the transition of the directed halibut fishery from the International Pacific Halibut Commission to the National Marine Fisheries Service and the Pacific Fishery Management Council, as described in Agenda Item E2, Attachment 1, November 2020. For Section 4.1.2, Alternative 2, consider the directed fishery framework during the catch sharing plan process in September and November, including any guidance for vessel limits and in-season changes for NMFS implementation. Under 4.2.1, Alternative 2, which issues permits for all Area 2A halibut fisheries, including the commercial directed, incidental salmon troll, incidental sablefish, and recreational charter halibut fisheries. Under 4.2.2, Alternative 2, allow NMFS to determine the appropriate application deadline for all commercial halibut applications, set to coincide with council meetings and NMFS processing time. Under 4.2.5, Alternative 1, which is the revised status quo, require proof of permit to be on board fishing vessels and made readily available upon request, regardless of the type of permit, for example, paper or electronic. NIMS to provide access to permit in a printable format or send paper copy directly to participant.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Does the language on the screen accurately reflect your motion?
Yes, it does.
Okay, looking for a second. Butch Smith. Thank you, Butch. Heather, speak to your motion.
Thank you. Again, I think there's been a lot of really productive conversations that have gone into getting us to this place. Relative to the management process in September, I was a little bit worried about how that might work in terms of the in-season process that we would have under NIMS management. But I thought about that between September and now, and I think that based on the implementation timeline, we can put forward guidance and conditional responses that'll really help us through that. We have time, as Brett pointed out, as we look to implementation and maybe a little more time than we had thought. But anyway, to look at historical data so we can develop the tools that'll make that, I hope, that in-season process smooth. I know we do need in-season changes for this fishery in particular. Relative to the permitting process, it does seem to make sense to leave it to NIMS to issue the permits for all of these fisheries rather than having two separate processes. And also in terms of application deadlines, making sure that those are set at a workable deadlines. And then relative to proof of permit, I think we had a really good conversation in September on getting the wording right here. It's one of the things that is supported by all the advisory bodies and the stakeholders that we've heard from. So I think that change to this 4.2.5 alternative 1 looks good. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Any other any comments, discussion on the motion for us? Okay. Well, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. With that, Brett, how are we doing here?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think you're doing really well. You've completed the action here, which was to choose your final preferred alternatives for transitioning Area 2A management from the IPHC to the National Marine Fisheries Service and Pacific Fishery Management Council. Congratulations, you have another fishery to manage. Thinking forward, into the future on this fishery, we know there's some consternation over yellow-eye bycatch right now in this fishery, and we'll get to that under E3 and the in-season management and discuss those things. But we will start to look at managing this fishery directly and start laying out the sideboards and what we want to do in the future. So we'll just keep an eye on things as they roll along, but I think in the gap, they will start to think about how they want to manage the fishery too, and what's reasonable and helpful. So at any rate, we're going to continue to look forward on this fishery and work with the council, of course, and we'll see how this plays out. So thank you very much for all the hard work, and I appreciate being part of the process.
Well, thank you, Brett. And the transition here has just been incredibly smooth and just a testament to everybody involved. So thank you, everyone. And with that, I'm going to give the gavel back to Chair Gorelnik. Mark?
Thank you, Vice Chair Brad Pettinger. You have done an extraordinary job with these agenda items. Took care of them very efficiently. And combined with a relatively efficient morning, we found ourselves done with the day's agenda. It just goes to show you that some estimates are low and some estimates are high. And of course, much better wrapping up just before 3 than wrapping up around 6 or 7, especially on a Friday. So we'll come back on Monday, take the weekend off, and pick up with salmon. But before we do that, I'll turn to our executive director, Chuck Tracy, to see if he has any announcements before we break for the weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, nothing really. Just echo your comments. Congratulations on being on time, and hope people have a safe and enjoyable weekend. And we'll be reconvening Monday at 8 o'clock with our salmon agenda items, finishing with our last halibut item for the day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Stay dry. And we'll see you bright and early, 8 o'clock on Monday morning.